Hello, I'm Gus Downing, publisher and editor of the D&D Daily, and this is the LP News Network. With 96% of the nation's retailers experiencing organized retail crime, 67% experiencing its continued growth, and the National Retail Security Survey published just this week showing shoplifting and ORC is still the leading cause of retail shrink for the fourth consecutive year. It's no wonder that organized retail crime continues to be the biggest physical store security risk for retailers in the U.S. Interestingly enough, the Daily, which reports on all publicly reported ORC, also documented the sharp rise 4 years ago and has continued steady growth, mirroring the NRSS survey and the NRF ORC survey findings as well. Back in 2005, when the national effort to combat ORC truly started, the NRF's VP of Loss Prevention, Joe LaRocca, one of our MCs in these series, was one of the early pioneers, along with LAPD's effort led by Captain Billy Williams, Albuquerque's effort, and Limited Brands' effort led by Paul Jones at the time, and CLEAR, the Coalition of Law Enforcement and Retail, formed in 2008, and is really the only other national effort. These 5 groups and executives really started the national collaborative effort that has now grown to over 30 ORC associations across the country and 10,000 basically law enforcement and LP executives involved. So working together to fight the retail's #1 physical store security arrest. And here today to speak with us about the ORC effort at the NRF and some challenges and some trends that they're seeing are the 2 co-chairs of the NRF's ORC Investigators Network Committee, Jon Shimp, Vice President Risk Management, Louis Vuitton at LVMH, and Gabe Esposito, Director, Security Loss Prevention and Public Safety Outreach at Verizon, and 2 of their team members, Chris Baker, Field Loss Prevention Manager, Verizon, and Robert Ruiz, Regional Director, Asset Protection, Louis Vuitton. Gentlemen, thanks for being here today.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks for having us.
You know, Jon, let's start with you. Could you give us a brief overview of what your committee at the NRF is doing and how is it coming?
Sure. Before we jump to that, I just want to say thank you and to the D&D for helping obviously publicize the ORC efforts that are out there, and a big thank you to the NRF as well with Gabe, and I want to give a shout out to April O'Brien, who's been a huge help for us for the committee piece, because really what we're trying to do is we're trying to reestablish the communication. We've started our quarterly calls the last 2 years. We've really tried to elevate what had existed previously and to motivate a lot of the people to join these calls. So we've really put it on the regional leads to help us out with the agenda, getting some guest speakers to come on and really push the effort of the ORC issues that we see, and also to work with the local ORCAs that are out there that they're dealing with every day.
Mm-hmm. You know, Gabe, how's the effort going and what's the value of the network itself?
Yeah, thanks. Thanks for having us again, and thanks for helping to promote the efforts of the NRF as well as our committee and the Investigators Network within the NRF. Look, I think that it's going great, probably better than at least I expected or anticipated when we started this with Jon a couple of years ago. And the network itself is growing, I think, organically. In large part because of the issues obviously affecting the industry, but also because of the efforts of our regional leaders who are really helping to drive the momentum locally and again organically. Look, the value, to use a cliche, you get out of it what you put into it, is the networking opportunities that continue to thrive through the network, not only regionally, and by the way, as you know, we've broken out the network into 6 regions, mimicking what FEMA does, each led by regional leader. And so the value is not only through the local efforts where professionals, law enforcement, academia, and others come together to talk about local trends, to talk about and share best practices, but also the value is at the national level where we, across the 6 regions, are able to sort of put together, the major trends, the best practices, and then disseminate it not only to the folks that are part of the network, which I encourage all of you who are not part of it to join, but also to other LP professionals so that they too can leverage what we're experiencing or what we're learning regionally and nationally.
Mm-hmm. How many people usually participate in the calls, if I may ask?
It really depends by region, but we could see anywhere from 50 to 100 people depending on the size of the region. And we've seen really good success, and April's done a great job for us in reporting back to us who's been on the call, sending out contact information. And I also think getting law enforcement on the calls as well as our mall security partners has been a big change for us. So it's not just the retailers talking, but there's a really good mix of people on the call.
And what's your objective, John? I mean, what's the objective, you and Gabe, of the committee and the mission?
Raise awareness. I mean, I think that's our biggest, from my take, is really to raise awareness that this is going on, that it's important. Because if you really take a step back and think about it, this is all volunteer work. Everything we do is volunteer. Everything the NRF is helping us is volunteer. Our regional leaders are all volunteering their time, and it's a lot of effort even to set up for these calls, let alone the ORCA meetings that happen. So our biggest thing is to promote how important it is to build and foster that relationship with law enforcement and also our mall security partners, and really share information. At the end of the day, we all have to work together, and I think that's been the biggest hurdle that we've seen in the past, where now, as we move forward, I can't tell you how great of the partnerships that we have with our local law enforcement, our state law enforcement, and our federal law enforcement to really help us with this issue.
Gabe, what are some of the trends that you're seeing from these calls on a national level?
Yeah, so at the national level, and then I'd like to turn it over to Chris and Rob just to talk a little bit about what they're experiencing within their regions. So sophistication is definitely on the rise, as is the violence that our retail employees unfortunately are having to deal with as a result of the escalation in aggravated shoplifting incidences, in aggravated assaults, in robberies, and the use of mace and other devices against our employees. So violence is also a trend that we're experiencing nationally, and as is always the case, one of the other values, and I think we've talked about this a little bit, of the network is sharing information and intelligence, so that ultimately we can apprehend and lock up the bad guys. I mean, the same bad guys that affect us are affecting many others, and vice versa. And through these calls, we often hear the dots being connected and cases being made literally on the spot. So if I may, I'll turn it over to Chris and to Rob, talk a little bit about their regional experiences.
Sure,
absolutely. So I chair the Midwest region, so it's one of the biggest geographically. We go from Utah all the way to Ohio. Something that we're seeing generally across that area that we've been sharing a lot is the use of social media now to commit ORC crimes, using things like third-party selling apps, using things like Facebook to communicate, where they're doing a lot of things out in the open where they believe they have anonymity, but they really don't. So it's working with law enforcement and retail to kind of get a better understanding of how we approach it, because I think when we look at a certain crime, I'm in Chicago, he's in New York, the way we may have to interact with law enforcement may be different, but sharing our successes from one place to another may lead to us being able to change the way we go about doing something, partnering with law enforcement or with retailers. So definitely use of social media and being able to develop quicker partnerships, I think, has been one of the big successes so far too.
And I would echo that. I think one of the things that we're seeing in the New York metro market is the violent crime. A huge focus for us is really getting that information out there to our partners, so that way not only do we stop the bleeding in our stores, but we protect our people and protect the public. So working with even other ORCers, sharing information, because now we're also seeing that a lot of the same subjects are traveling. Once they feel that they're too hot, I guess, in the New York market or the Jersey market, they'll move to the next one. So kind of just spreading our wings a little bit more and saying, hey, we have this issue, do you have this issue? And sharing that information across the board has helped us close some cases and build better partnerships.
Yeah. How is the development of Metro going?
The development is amazing. I mean, we're pushing, 400 people at our conferences. This last conference in April was amazing. We've been focusing on developing our website to make sure that it's easy to use for all parties, whether it be retail putting information in or law enforcement gaining information to close out their cases. We've even gone as far as developing an app, so that way it's that much easier for the user to put information in to help us resolve our cases. And again, as far as developing the Metro ORCA, under the leadership of TJ Flynn and Lieutenant Shepard and Captain Ron, we've re-looked at how we're organized. internally. So that way we're constantly touching the right people. You know, it shouldn't be just one specialty retailer. It should be retailers from all walks of life that have a say in what's going on within the Metro ORCA. And I think that that has positioned us to be a better ORCA and a better partner and support for the organizations and the ORCAs all over the board, across the board.
Chris, are you involved in one of the local ORCs associations?
Absolutely, yeah. So I'm involved with CC Rock, which is Cook County in Chicago. Attended the My Rock conference for Michigan this past year. Attend the calls and the meetings for a lot of the others in the area. And that's one of the successes we've been able to have with these quarterly calls is being able to partner with those ORCAs, bring them in as guest speakers, share what their agenda is going to be, share some recaps from their conferences, just generally sharing information between because just like Rob said, for that area, whatever happens in Chicago is likely going to go down one of the highways to St. Louis, Detroit, Indianapolis, you name it, that stuff travels very quickly. And like you said, the groups are constantly moving. So being able to not only talk about it on a larger region scale, up to talk about it with Gabe and Jon and the leaders nationally, but being able to take it back to the locals as well and giving them that information just makes it more effective.
You know, I continue to hear from different various groups and also through the daily that the increased violence in retail. But yet you don't see it in some of the surveys or in the news as much, or, you know, what you hear is, you know, crime's down, this is down, that's down. But from a retail perspective, I mean, we're seeing the increase in violence. And how much of that is associated with ORC if you were to kind of try to match the two up?
Oh, I would say, you know, I think from an industry standpoint, I would say it's over 75% when you look at the violence piece. You know, it's not, I don't want to say the shoplifters are gone. They're still there and they're taking their things as they want, but it seems to be that the trend is really starting to become more violent, more people at the same time, gang initiated, gang activity, and they really are taking the onus that there's corporate policies sometimes that are out there that they know that they can get around, and violence is one way of doing it for them right now.
You agree with that, Gabe?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that, you know, obviously will vary by industry, but anything that we look at from a violent, sort of violence rooted perspective ties back to organized gangs primarily. And so I absolutely agree.
Is it opioid epidemic driven? I mean, is a large piece of this that?
You know, we had sort of an offline discussion about what may be at the root of it, and have spoken with our great friends in law enforcement. And I think the consensus is that certainly is a driver for the increase in violence.
Yeah,
and,
there's a number of
factors that are impacting. You know, some of the changes in certain laws obviously are driving it. The fact, you know, what Jon just pointed out, the fact that the bad guys know what, you know, how far they can push the envelope. But there are a number of factors that are
to stay under the felony threshold.
Yeah,
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think one of the things we've realized working with the ORCAs or within the ORCAs and partnering is, yes, we have the opioid issue, and we know that that's driving some of the aggressiveness in the stores, but it's also the gangs. And we've also reached out to the gang unit, so no longer do we just focus on, you know, the detectives that deal with the larcenies. Now we're working with the detectives that deal with the gang units and saying, okay, this person is your person, so we need to work together, because if this person's off the streets, you don't have an issue, we don't have an issue, and the public is safe. So,
How much is cyber playing a role in the store line ORC? How much is cyber crime, or just the cyber generic term? How much is that driving it?
It's driving it. I think it's looked at differently, though. You know, when you think about the physical act of stealing versus the computer side of theft, you see that more. It feels more of a corporate side than it necessarily is a store line side, even though it's the store line side where the information typically is taken. I don't. It's a problem for sure, but I don't think it's as big of a problem right now than the violent crimes that we see in there.
Yeah, again, I think that it varies, you know, by retailer or line of business. From my perspective, some of the most sophisticated and at least financially impacting crimes are, you know, very often facilitated by very sophisticated cyber criminals
Right.
who are who are partners with the street gangs and the middlemen
Right.
and the fences, et cetera. But they're utilizing some pretty sophisticated cyber techniques, if you will, to perpetrate large frauds.
Is there one technology, is there one thing that's helping the effort, that's helping the teams out there that you can mention or?
It's a tough topic, to talk about.
Yeah, it is.
And I don't know how specific I would necessarily get, but I do think, if there's a few things, I think if you have good video surveillance, good partnerships with law enforcement, good partnerships with mall security, I think those are critical. I will throw out there as a challenge, we were talking about this a little bit before, we hear about facial recognition, but I don't think it's there yet. And I think it looks good on paper, but I don't necessarily see it good in action yet. So these are things that I'd like to push forward with the industry on working on that. And there's some other technologies that I think have been very successful, but I'd rather not talk about that because
Certainly,
I think
certainly.
it's better to keep that amongst ourselves.
Certainly, certainly. Gabe and John, what's the message you want to send as the NRF's committee co-chairs to the viewers?
For me, I think it's really important as a big message to the people that are watching this or that will watch this. Join us in the fight against ORC. Sign up. Join a call. Join a local ORCA. Make something a little bit different. Get outside of that silo that we're all sometimes in when we're working for a specific company and make the effort for the industry to really help us fight and combat this ORC. Law enforcement partners, please make sure to join us as well. Mall security. Our biggest goal is to advertise, and I say that from the 10,000-foot view,
Right.
because our job is to really push the agenda, to push people to get involved, to come visit our. Tomorrow we have a breakfast that I think for the first time it's sold out for the ORC breakfast, the NRF. I mean, that says a lot that people are interested in. They're listening to us, but I'd love to see that continue and grow.
Yeah, I would echo that. Certainly get involved. Join the NRF's Investigators Network. I think, they're at, we have over 20,000 members. A subset of those members participate in the regional ORC effort that our team members lead. But we need more, and ultimately you'll find that you get a lot out of being part of the network. Again, I saw it at our breakfast at NRF last year. I hear it on the regional calls where cases are literally being made on the spot as a result of exchanging information, intelligence, and best practices. And so join us.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's a situation where we deal with completely different industries. We deal with phones and purses and different things like that, or clothing. But we come together and we realize the criminals are doing the same thing.
Right.
They're stealing different things, but they're doing it the same way, and we're working through it together. And just like Gabe said, we've had calls where we've literally made connections on the call, set up calls afterwards with the group, and been able to work together, partner on cases. We take down a fence, and it's amazing when you find 20 or 30 different retailers, information, product, whatever it is, in those locations, and be able to work that kind of stuff. So that's what we're looking to do.
I think two things for me: information and partnership. If we don't have the information, we're not going to be successful. If we don't have the partnership, we're not going to be successful. So information and partnership are the two key things.
Gentlemen, thanks for being here today.
Thank you for
Appreciate you taking
having
the
us.
time.
Thanks
for having
Appreciate
us.
it.
Awesome.
Well, that's it for this episode, ladies and gentlemen. We'd like to thank you for watching. And until next time, let's keep them all safe out there.